So now we're up to the part of the topic where we're looking at wanting to simplify algebraic fractions. Now, I know the focus in the heading, I suppose, is fractions. That's sort of the part of the topic that we've moved on to. But I really want to make sure that you guys understand that in essence, all we're doing here as teachers is assessing your factorization skills. So in the last several videos where we looked at the difference of two squares, factorizing quadratic trinomials, factorizing using the grouping methods, or even your basic sort of factorization using your distributive law, all of those techniques are absolutely paramount when it comes to simplifying these algebraic fractions. Now, there are three types that we're going to be looking at, and we're clearly starting off with the first one. So the first one is when you just have a standalone fraction, as you can see in each of these three examples in front of you, where you've got something in the numerator and something in the denominator. Now, the first thing I'm going to say here is your first step should always be factorizing terms in the numerator or denominator if possible. Do not start by wanting to cancel out factors, which is what I see a lot of students do at the beginning of the year when they see these types of questions. Don't cross out the 6 and the 12 and the 18 that you can see in part A there. Don't think about that, just factorize. Factorize first, and then we'll worry about canceling factors out. So with that being said, let's just jump straight to the first one, right? So I'm going to zoom in here. So for part A, we've got a 6x minus 12 over 18. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to cross out the 6 and the 18 and then maybe the 12 and the 18, because crossing in that particular way is technically not what you're meant to be doing, and it's mathematically incorrect. The correct way is to actually factorize things so you can cross out your factors. So in the numerator, we can see that there's a common factor of 6. So we can take that out, and on the inside, we're going to have an x minus 2. So that's just your normal basic factorization using your distributive law in reverse, I suppose, all over the 18. Okay, so we're at this stage where we factorize the numerator. We wrote down the 18 on the bottom because it's not much you can do. And now we start to think about, can I further simplify by either crossing factors out, or in this case, simplify 6 over 18. Now that's just a third, so that means my answer would be x minus 2 on the numerator, 3 on the bottom. And that's the answer. That's the answer for the first one. Okay. Moving on to part B, where we've got a lot more pronumerals going on. We've got an x cubed minus an x squared all over an x squared minus 1. So this is where your factorization techniques is actually going to be quite important. Step number 1, factorize. Factorize the top, factorize the bottom. Now, in terms of the numerator, the x cubed and the x squared, they both have a common factor of x squared. So let's take that outside the brackets. And then we're going to have a remainder of an x minus a 1 for the rest of the numerator. On the bottom, x squared minus 1, hopefully you guys recognize that that is the difference of two squares. So we're going to use the difference of two squares to factorize that. So it'll be x minus 1, x plus 1. Okay, so we've done the first step, which is factorizing as much as we can. Now we can start crossing out factors. You can cross out a factor from the numerator, provided there's that same factor on the denominator. So in this particular case here, they both share an x minus 1, so I can cross each of those factors out. So that means I have an x squared remaining on the top and an x plus 1 remaining on the bottom there. Okay, just something I'll mention very, very quickly. Don't over cancel by crossing out one of those x's with that x over there, right? So just to clarify, you can't cross, things out in this particular way because they're not actually factors, right? So the best way to identify whether or not you can or you can't do that is if you have like a plus or a minus in between a couple of things, like the x on the left and the 1 on the right there, that means you're not really looking at two sort of individual factors. They're actually terms, right? So long story short, look for that plus or minus sign in between. If you have that in there, you can't cross out each of sort of the x or the 1 out individually. So let's move on to the very final one. Let me just get rid of that blue arrow there and move on to this one over here. So this is still a similar type, right? So it's a standalone fraction. So we've got an x squared plus 2x plus 1 on the numerator, and an x squared minus x minus 2. So you can see here we've got two quadratic trinomials both on the top and the bottom. And our first job, as we've been doing all video, is factorize first. These are quadratic trinomials, so you can, I'm going to use the cross method to factorize. Some of you guys might use the PSF method. Now, the advantage of knowing the cross method is, once you've sort of mastered how to do the cross method quite quickly, is I can actually visualize and see what the factors are without actually having to do the working out as an aside. So for instance, the top over here, I know it's going to be like x plus 1 and x plus 1, right? Which I'm just going to simply write that as x plus 1 squared. So it's a nice perfect square. And at the bottom, I can quickly see that it's going to be an x minus 2, and then you need an x plus 1 for that factorization. Okay. Now, if you need to sort of pause this video and then do a bit of sort of work on the side, whether it be the cross method or the PSF method, great, do that. But just understand that over time, when you do more of these questions and when you get better at factorization, you kind of want to get to the stage where you can just write them down. All right, so it's at this point here that we can cross out our factors. So in this particular case here, we have a whole brackets x plus 1 factor that we can cross out with another whole bracket x plus 1 factor, so they will disappear. And then that's it. There's nothing else that crosses out, so we'll just write down the final answer. So we have an x plus 1 still remaining on the top because it was, well, we technically had 2 of them in the top. And then we have the x minus 2 on the bottom sitting there. So that's our simplification. So these are our first type number 1. And essentially all you have to do here is factorize first and then start crossing out those factors. Hey everybody, if this video helped you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It supports the channel and helps me keep making more free content for you. I'll see you guys next time.